There are people who enter our lives as gently as a breeze, unannounced, unprepared, yet leave an imprint so deep that we find ourselves unable to forget. It isn't a coincidence, nor is it a mere chance. It's that strange sensation as if the universe had quietly arranged for two seemingly unrelated paths to intersect, precisely at the moment when both are ready. This phenomenon is synchronicity, a sacred alignment between the inner and outer worlds, where encounters don't happen by accident, but because a deeper layer of meaning is being awakened. It's when two souls, after walking separate journeys, after stumbling and growing, finally find each other not through logic, but through the invisible frequency of spirit. True love does not arise from reasons, nor is it born of calculation, nor does it require effort to sustain. It simply appears when both have become the most authentic version of themselves. And from that moment on, every profound relationship we've ever had, whether sweet or painful, carries within it a sacred layer, the role of the teacher, the mirror, or the one who opens a door we never knew existed. So how can we recognize a true connection? How do we distinguish the call of the soul from the echo of old patterns? And more importantly, how do we keep from losing ourselves in the search for someone else? This essay is an inward journey, a space where we'll reflect on the deep relationships that have passed through our lives, uncover the psychological mechanics behind those mysterious soul tremors, and arrive at the truth that love is not something we find, it is something we become when we are awake enough to finally recognize ourselves. 1. The invisible bond between souls. There are moments in life when we meet someone and feel an immediate, inexplicable resonance. It's not because they're perfect, nor is it because they match the criteria we once set for an ideal partner. It's because their presence touches something deep within us, a part of ourselves that had long been asleep. Carl Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence where two streams of energy intersect at the right time to awaken something essential in both people. We often believe relationships enter our lives by chance. However, according to Jung, nothing in the psyche is ever entirely random. Every encounter is a reflection of an internal process being activated, as if an invisible code within us is attracting those who carry a matching frequency to help us see ourselves more clearly. In other words, we don't just love someone for who they are. We love the part of ourselves they allow us to see. Sometimes it's a beautiful part we've forgotten. Other times it's a wounded part that's never been healed. Kindred souls don't need much time to connect because the resonance happens at the level of energy, beyond words, beyond reason, or beyond reason. They arrive and awaken in us a kind of remembering, not a personal memory, but a soul memory. That sense of "I've known you forever" is not an illusion. It's the result of archetypal resonance, a stirring of the collective unconscious, the primal symbolic patterns that have existed since the dawn of humanity. When someone activates the sleeping archetype within us, be it the healer, the guide, or even the inner shadow, we're instantly drawn to them as if by an inescapable force of destiny. Jung once said, "Meeting the right person at the right time is a sign you are nearing the process of individuation, the journey of becoming your most authentic and integrated self." Soul connections, therefore, are not just for love. They exist to awaken. They force us to be honest with ourselves and to look at the forgotten, denied, or avoided parts of our being. Sometimes that encounter brings peace. Other times it brings storms. But either way, it marks a turning point in the journey of the soul. Most importantly, not all souls meet in a single lifetime. For two souls to truly connect, there must be not only energetic resonance, but also a matching level of inner maturity. If one is not yet ready, the connection may arrive at the wrong time, leading to heartbreak or collapse. But that doesn't mean the bond wasn't real. It still exists, still vibrates, only waiting for a different time, a different frequency, a different evolution for it to truly bloom. The invisible bond between souls isn't about how many people we meet. It's about how many of those encounters cause us to look at ourselves, honestly and deeply. These are not loud connections, but they leave long echoes. They do not rush, but they leave an imprint that cannot fade. So when you feel a deep pull towards someone, don't rush to explain it. Just listen, for it might be your soul whispering, "Wish are wrong, great." there is something important for us here. And if you are still enough to feel it and brave enough to explore it, that connection will become a gateway, a journey home to your truest self. 2. Love is a mirror for the shadow. Love through the lens of Carl Jung is not merely a union between two individuals. It is a portal into the depths of the unconscious, where the shadow resides. When you truly love someone, it's not just their appearance, their actions, or their words that captivate you. You love them because, on a deeper level, they activate an unresolved part of you. And that part, more often than not, is not your light, but your darkness. The shadow, as Jung described it, is the rejected part of our psyche, emotions, desires, memories, or traits we have denied, suppressed, or deemed unacceptable. But here lies the paradox. The shadow does not disappear when we ignore it. It merely retreats into the unconscious, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And love, perhaps the most intense of human emotions, is one of the strongest catalysts for its awakening. When you enter a deep relationship, sooner or later you will come face to face with yourself. Not the polished version, but the part of you that feels ashamed, wounded, jealous, controlling, or weak. The other person becomes a living mirror, not to reflect the beautiful image you wish to maintain, but to illuminate the parts of yourself you've never dared to face. You'll begin asking difficult questions. Why did I react so strongly to something they said? Why do I always feel unloved? Why am I so afraid of losing them that I lose myself? These questions are not accusations. They are signals from your shadow, knocking on the door of your soul, asking to be acknowledged. And here lies the deeper meaning of love as a path to healing. Your partner does not come to complete you, but to shatter the illusions you've clung to. When you feel rejected, it awakens the memory of abandonment. When you feel jealous, it exposes your unhealed insecurity. When you fear losing them, it reveals the part of you that still believes you're unworthy of love. True love, therefore, is not without conflict. But the clashes are not destruction, they are purification. A painful yet necessary process that brings you closer to your own truth. As Jung wrote, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And love, if you have the courage to stay through it, is the torch that illuminates the hidden corners of your soul, making healing possible. However, not everyone is brave enough to walk beside their shadow. Many retreat when they see themselves reacting uncontrollably. They blame the other person. They believe they've chosen the wrong partner. But in truth, what hurts is not them. It is the part of you they unknowingly touched. They didn't cause the wound. They merely revealed the place you've never let anyone see. Only when you realize this can you break free from the repetitive cycles in relationships. Because if you haven't learned the lesson of your shadow, you will continue to attract people who reflect it again and again. Not because you're unlucky, but because your soul is still seeking wholeness. When you begin to face the shadow in love, not running, not blaming, but welcoming it as a natural part of who you are, you not only heal, but you unlock the capacity to love purely and maturely. True love is not about finding the perfect person. It's about daring to let them see all of you, even the parts still under construction. 3. Reenacting wounds as a path to healing. Have you ever wondered why you keep falling into the same patterns in relationships? Why does love always seem to lead to pain? Why intimacy bring with it the fear of abandonment, betrayal, or being misunderstood? The faces may change, the circumstances evolve, yet the familiar emotions, uncertainty, inadequacy, disappointment, circle back like a faded loop. Carl Jung offered a profound perspective to decode this mystery. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In other words, what repeats in our relationships is not coincidence, but the reenactment of an unresolved healing process, projected through different people and situations. The human mind has a peculiar ability. It will always lead you back to the place you were once hurt, not to make you suffer again, but to give you a chance to rewrite the ending. In psychoanalysis, this phenomenon is called repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate early life scenarios in hopes that this time you might act differently, understand something deeper, or finally heal the wound. For example, if you were abandoned as a child, you may grow up unconsciously drawn to emotionally distant, unavailable people, those who can't offer you safety or presence. This might seem paradoxical. Why choose what hurts? But deep within, your psyche is attempting to resolve the old pain by reconstructing a familiar situation with the silent hope. This time I will be chosen. This time I will be loved. This time someone will stay. Yet without awareness of this mechanism, you won't transcend the wound. You'll relive it. You'll keep loving people who aren't ready, keep overextending yourself, keep enduring coldness and disconnection, all while clinging to the hidden belief, I'm not good enough to be loved without sacrifice. Thus, the people we attract aren't merely wrong matches. They are reflections of our inner world. They show up to activate the parts of us that are disoriented, repressed, or crying out for recognition. These relationships, no matter how contradictory or painful, are actually portals to a deeper understanding of ourselves. Carl Jung once said that the shadow only begins to heal when we dare to face it without judgment. And nowhere does the shadow show itself more clearly than in love. When we're jealous, it's because we fear loss. When we're controlling, it's because we feel powerless. When we tolerate too much, it's because we believe we're not worthy of asking for more. But here's the miracle. When we begin to see this truth, we can choose differently. We no longer love to prove something. We no longer seek others to fill what's lacking. Instead, we love as someone who understands their wounds and no longer burdens another with the responsibility to heal them. To reenact a wound with awareness is not a sentence, it is a path to awakening. When you dare to confront the patterns repeating in your relationships, you're no longer a victim of fate. You become the author rewriting the script of your own life. And from that moment forward, the people you attract will change. They will no longer be those who mirror your trauma, but those who respect your wholeness. They won't demand your affection. They will honor your presence as self-evident. That's when love transforms, from a desperate thirst to a state of inner fullness. And you come to understand that every relationship from the past, whether sweet or painful, has served your evolution in the deepest way possible. 4. Every relationship is a classroom. If you look back on your life's journey, you may realize something unexpected. The relationships that had the deepest impact on you were not necessarily the most pleasant ones. Sometimes the person who hurt you the most was the one who taught you a lesson no textbook could ever offer. And sometimes the one you couldn't keep was the very person who left an imprint that will never fade. Carl Jung, with his penetrating insight into the human psyche, once said, "Every person you meet plays the role of a teacher on the path back to your true self." They don't arrive by accident, but to awaken something within you that even you may not yet know exists. Your fragility, your unhealed parts, your longing to be seen and loved. You may learn trust from someone who betrayed you. Learn boundaries from someone who violated them. Learn presence from someone who left without a word. And learn self-love from the very person who made you feel unworthy. So when a relationship arrives, whether it ends in harmony or heartbreak, it is still a classroom. Some classes last years, some just a fleeting moment, some you willingly signed up for, others you were pushed into as if by fate. But the lesson is always there, quietly waiting for your readiness. Yet most of us resist learning. We react rather than observe. We judge rather than understand. We look for fault in others instead of asking, what is this relationship trying to teach me? It is precisely this lack of awareness that causes us to repeat the same mistakes, love the wrong people, place trust in the wrong hands, and doubt ourselves after each collapse. One of the greatest lessons relationships bring is the truth of who you are, not through compliments, but through the moments when you feel wounded, not during the sweetness, but through the conflicts, the misunderstandings, the confrontations. Because it's in crisis that the ego is stripped away, the shadow is revealed, and your true self begins to emerge. Jung referred to this as the phase of reflection, when what you see in others is actually a projection of what lives inside you. Someone who angers you may be touching your fear of losing control. Someone who fascinates you may embody a part of you that has been repressed for too long. Your freedom, wildness, creativity, or passion. When you become aware that you are learning from the relationship, your impulsive reactions begin to fade. You start observing. You start asking, why am I attracting this type of person? What does my reaction reveal about old wounds? What role is this person playing in my evolution? Are they a teacher, a mirror, or a test? And here's a truth no one wants to hear. Sometimes the people you love the most will challenge you the deepest. They pull you into your darkness so you can learn to turn on the light. They let you fall so you can learn how to catch yourself. And they leave so you can learn the hardest lesson of all, how not to lose yourself, no matter who stays or goes. When you begin to see relationships as a learning space, blame starts to fade. Gratitude arises, not because they were right, but because through them, you saw where you needed to grow. Through them, you saw what you compromised and what you now know you deserve. And when the lesson is complete, you'll gently close the door yourself without needing someone else to slam it shut. That's when new relationships will arrive, not to teach you through pain anymore, but to grow with you in peace. 5. Departure is not loss, but a gateway. We often fear endings. When someone leaves our life, whether quietly or chaotically, the first reaction is usually a mix of heartbreak, confusion, and unconscious resistance. Why did they leave? What did I do wrong? They were supposed to stay. But if you are still enough to look beneath the surface of parting, you may realize that not every departure is a loss. Sometimes it is an opening, a gateway for a new version of yourself to be born. Carl Jung once said, "What we call the end is often the beginning." In depth psychology, rupture is not a sign of collapse, but the signal of a completed cycle, like an eggshell that must crack for the bird to emerge, or an old skin that must shed to reveal a new one. Likewise, some relationships, no matter how beautiful, must come to an end, not because they were meaningless, but because they have fulfilled their purpose in your soul's evolution. But suffering often arises from our resistance to this truth. We cling, we rebuild, we reshape ourselves just to stay compatible with someone who no longer aligns with who we are. We call this loving fully, but more often it's a deep fear of losing a piece of our identity that we fused with that person. Have you ever asked yourself, why did that person appear at exactly that moment, only to leave just as suddenly? The answer doesn't lie in logic, but in soul resonance. When you are in a particular emotional frequency or lesson phase, you attract people who match that energy. They come to teach you about love, about self-respect, about boundaries, or simply to awaken a part of you that has long been dormant. And when the lesson is complete, when your soul shifts frequency, they leave. Not because you failed, not because they were wrong, but because the alignment has changed. Separation is not a failure of love, it's the closing act of a destined role. Think of a past relationship that once left you torn for a long time. Looking back now, can you see how it shaped you? How it made you stronger, clearer, or more aware of what you truly deserve? That's the gateway we often miss while standing in the storm. Jung called this moment the dissolution of the old ego, a stage where, if you choose to embrace the pain instead of fleeing from it, you enter a phase of inner rebirth. In that space, you are no longer the person who fears loss, who clings, who believes they cannot live without someone else. You become someone new, steadier, clearer, and freer, even in the solitude you once feared. The departure of another is also the universe's test. Will you continue to live as a victim of loss, or will you choose to become the creator of your own life from the ashes of your emotions? Will you build your next relationship from an unhealed wound, or from a lesson deeply integrated? Because here's the truth. What leaves you does not take the best parts of you. On the contrary, it strips away what no longer serves, giving you the chance to touch your most authentic self. Sometimes what you perceive as loss is exactly what needs to be released for you to enter a more mature phase of emotional and spiritual life. So learn to be grateful even for those who left, not because they were right, but because through them, you saw yourself more clearly. Not because they were perfect, but because their imperfections forced you to grow. In the end, when you no longer see departure as an ending, but as an invitation to rebirth, you will feel free. Free from control, free from fear, free from the illusion that someone out there must complete you. Because by then you've come to understand that you are the one who holds the key to your own becoming. 6. True love comes from wholeness. We often think that love is about finding someone who can fill the emptiness within us, someone who makes us feel less lonely and less hollow, someone who gives us a sense of being needed, valued, and loved. But the love that stems from lack only breeds dependency. Dependency sooner or later leads to control, hurt, or the deep disappointment that arises when the other person fails to fulfill the role of the one who makes us happy. Carl Jung once said, "Don't call it love if it stems from the fear of loneliness." Because true love is not a place to escape our inner void, but an expansion of a state of inner completeness. Those who love truly do not need someone to complete them. They do not love out of need, but out of a desire to give. They do not love to receive in return, but because their very being has become a natural flow of genuine affection. We can only love deeply when we are no longer afraid to lose. We can only love rightly when we no longer rely on another person to define our worth. When we love from a place of wholeness, we don't demand that the other person always be right, always understand us, or always be there to soothe our insecurities. Instead, we can see them with presence and non-judgment. See their true self, even in their moments of weakness and confusion, or when they no longer resemble the ideal we once painted of them. True love doesn't follow a script. It has no invisible contracts like, "You must do this," or "I must behave that way." It is a state of freedom, yet filled with commitment. It is when two souls have learned how to be alone without fear, so that when they meet, they do not cling to each other like lifelines, but walk side by side, not bound, yet never apart. You'll recognize true love not by the intensity of emotions at the beginning, but by the depth of peace when you are together. It is when you no longer need to try to be someone to be loved. It is when silence doesn't feel like distance, but becomes a sanctuary where both feel safe to be fully themselves. Jung called this the union of two individuals who have each walked their own path, who have done their inner work, faced their shadow, and healed their past, so that when they come together, it's not two incomplete pieces trying to mask each other's flaws, but two souls illuminating each other. A love like this is not a merging, but a resonance. And you'll also realize that when you love from a place of wholeness, you no longer feel the need to hold on, because you know if that person is truly aligned with your essence, they will choose to stay. And if they don't, then they do not belong in the growth that you are moving toward. In that moment, love is no longer a battle to win, but a space to nurture, to evolve, to understand, and if needed, to let go with grace. On the other hand, when you love from a place of emptiness, you'll easily fall into painful loops, jealousy, control, anxiety, and over-sacrifice. Because you're not truly loving the person, you're loving the feeling they bring. And when that feeling shifts, you begin to question the love. That is not love. It is emotional dependency in disguise. Therefore, true love is an act of maturity. It requires you to courageously look inward, dismantle faulty beliefs, heal old wounds, and learn how to stand strong in your own inner world. It is not an easy journey, but it is the only journey that allows you to love without pain, to love without losing yourself. At its deepest level, love is not about finding the right person, but becoming the right person. When you are your most authentic and complete self, you no longer need to search for love, because you have already become love itself. Everything you have ever gone through, from the heartbreaks that wounded you to the connections that awakened you, was never a mistake. They were the raw materials of your growth, the layers of mirrors through which your soul reflected and recognized itself. And when you understand that love is not salvation, but a sacred opportunity to expand your awareness, you will stop blaming those who left and begin to thank them. Carl Jung once said, "You will continue to encounter what you have not yet learned to observe." Every encounter, whether fleeting or profound, carries a lesson. When the lesson is truly received, the connection will either evolve into something higher or dissolve naturally, like a door that opens just long enough for you to take your next step forward. True love does not bind, it doesn't promise forever, nor does it demand perfection. It exists when two people are conscious enough to see each other, not through the veil of need, illusion, or fear, but with clarity and presence. It's a space where you don't have to hold on to anyone to show in, because those who stay are not bound by force, but drawn by resonance. And if you are currently in solitude, confused by half-formed connections, remember this: the one who is right for you does not arrive because you go looking. They arrive when you become the person you were born to be. True love, as Jung affirmed, is the meeting of two souls who have each made peace with themselves, so that when they find one another, they don't complete each other, but illuminate each other. And destiny, when it is ready, needs no name. It simply arrives.